We're the beautiful, we're the only Ghostbusters.
This is Ghostbusters 2. For a lot of people, this is where the highly beloved Ghostbusters franchise died. And this is Ghostbusters, the video game. As the name might imply, it's a Ghostbusters video game. But it's not just any video game, it's the game. Essentially, this is the long-lost third Ghostbusters sequel, only in video game form. So the question is, does the game live up to the legacy of those first two films? And why did this story need to be a video game instead of, another movie?
There are some things in this world that go way beyond human understanding. Things that cannot be explained, things that most people don't want to know about. That is where we come in.
The Ghostbusters have had quite a few sequels over the last few years, but that wasn't always the case. For many years, the franchise was trapped in development hell. Sure, there was the original classic, and a pretty okay sequel that people love to hate on. You have a few stray animated shows, video games, and tie-in comic books, but really, it was just those two films that loomed large over the franchise. They were a seemingly irreplicable combination of spooky scares, genuine laughs, and brilliantly drawn characters. Now, despite multiple attempts at mounting a third sequel with the original cast, one never materialized. You have the much-fabled Ghostbusters Hellbent, which would have shown our intrepid heroes fighting their way out of the afterlife, more or less. That one fell apart multiple times, mostly because Sony wasn't convinced that sending the Ghostbusters to hell was a viable narrative choice, and also because Bill Murray didn't want to reprise his role. Then you also have a rumored riff on the idea of legacy sequels that would have seen global franchises of the titular ghost fighting team cropping up across the planet. This version would have starred most of the Judd Apatow crew of regular comedic voices. There were multiple other attempts at restoring Ghostbusters to the big screen, but they all kept getting the big no for an annoyingly consistent cocktail of reasons. Where was Bill Murray? Or this feels too much like a horror film? Or are we sure this is the direction we want to go in? Just an incredibly consistent Greek chorus of doubt, political infighting, and hand-wringing. But thankfully, at a particularly dead spot in the franchise's history, someone had the bright idea of producing a sequel as a game. Ghostbusters, the video game, takes place in 1991. It operates as a period piece, having been released originally in June of 2009. While the first two movies saw the Ghostbusters struggling to work outside the system in order to prove to people that ghosts did in fact exist, the video game positions our team as having taken up a role as government contractors, working for the city of New York. Our player character, dubbed Rookie, fills the new recruit role. We're basically being hired to be the guinea pig. We're going to be testing the new, more experimental pieces of technology that Egon has been cooking up. While the game's plot is pretty fun, featuring a video gameized Alyssa Milano as the new mayor of New York, an army of cultists, and grand end-of-the-world stakes, it also feels kinda jumbled. You can feel that they had a pretty clean idea for a sequel based on Ghostbusters Hellbent, and then over years of development, scope creep, and just the realities of making a video game, things spiraled out into something a bit more unwieldy. But honestly, if you're a Ghostbusters fan, does that really even matter? And therein lies the creative Rubicon for this game. If you're a Ghostbusters fan, this is exactly what you wanted. All the original actors, including a deeply dead inside Bill Murray,
he appears to be after something specific.
Or someone.
Have come back and are trying to do what they thought of at the time as a loving send-off to the franchise. If you're less ardent in your support for the axiom that busting feels good, well, this game might not exactly scratch the corners of your brain you need scratched. The game is essentially a third-person shooter. You're running around proton-packing ghosts, scrambling through darkened hotels, and working to stop, well, ghosts. The problem being, the non-story elements of the game are pretty repetitive, fairly predictable, and the controls are a bit mushy, especially if you were unfortunate enough to play it on the Wii. But hey, at the end of the day, who cares? Because the original Ghostbusters got back together and appeared together on screen with another guy, and that's you. You're the other guy. Haven't you always wanted to live your dreams of being the blandest, most stock other guy? Well, now you can. The biggest misstep of this game, other than having some weak combat mechanics, annoying NPC AI, and a general aesthetic that looks like it's trying desperately to recreate the most bland version of 1991 possible, is that Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis aren't in it. Look, I know I just complained that it's a game built out of seeing actors you remember, but if that's what we're doing, let's do it. Apparently, Weaver and Morenus were contacted to be in the game, but declined. And then later, Weaver realized that literally everyone was back partying it up without her and reached out to be involved, but by that point, the train had left the station. One of the best parts of the game, frankly, is the atmosphere. Ghostbusters always struggles to get the right balance of horror and comedy. Is it a horror movie, or is it a comedy with the aesthetics of horror, or is it a Spirit Halloween store adapted to the screen? What's the vibe? Well, there are genuine sequences in Ghostbusters, the video game, that really balance that well, both from a narrative perspective and an aesthetic one. Like the simple fact that multiple levels involve you wandering around dark, destroyed, or flamed out buildings fighting ghosts. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That should be the vibe, always. None of this weird, brightly lit, it's daytime and we're all quipping in a Walmart energy. Ghostbusters the video game then got a remaster in 2019, which seems like a good time to do it. There's a new and hungry fan base developing, the next-gen platforms all have a massive step up in terms of graphical capacity, so let's see what this old clunker is capable of. The problem is, the remaster just kind of underlined even more of the issues we previously discussed. The level designs are annoying and frustrating in a way that pulls you out of the game. In a Ghostbusters game, the player should never be lost. Like literally not sure where to go on the map. That's a silly problem to have. That being said, the story of Ghostbusters the video game seems ripe for either adaptation or pillaging. Normally, it would be insane to say something like this, but the Ghostbusters franchise is so weird and kinda bad as is, why not take the assets from this game and do something with them? Like, sure, the game is fine, but maybe they can serve as the bones of a new story using the plot structure of the game. Maybe an animated movie. It seems like there's real potential here. It seems like this game had so much upside, ambition, and accomplished the miracle of actually getting all the Ghostbusters back together when they were alive. It just seems like something more than a remaster could be plumbed from these objectively impressive successes, because the game is almost what you want it to be.
We eat gods for breakfast?
Too much, you think?
No, I liked it.
Movie adaptations or movie tie-ins in the gaming world have a bad rep, and deservedly so. They're usually low-effort, cheap, poorly considered cash grabs. That's not what Ghostbusters the video game is, though. Maybe it's not a movie, maybe it's a Final Fantasy-style remake, a full remaster, reevaluation, and realignment of the core mechanics of the game. It's not like this would be the first time that's been mounted. However, it would be the first time it's been attempted for something that isn't looked back on as a classic. Ghostbusters the video game is fondly thought of in Ghostbusters circles, but in the wider public, it's almost unknown. Which, when you think about it, actually presents a real opportunity. You could remarket the game again with the improvements we briefly touched on as the missing Ghostbusters 3. This was kind of the marketing campaign when the game was released in 2009, but nerd culture and internet gaming discourse wasn't as fervent then. Now, that narrative might get you some more mileage.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
Thin crust New York style, no visible anchovy.
Maybe later.
Ghostbusters the video game in some ways is the best possible version of what it was going to be. It's a love letter to the fans, the original 2 movies, and the people behind the scenes. It has great ambitions and a genuinely exciting vision. The problem being, the game falls into the pit that a lot of games based around IP struggle with. They forget about the actual gameplay aspect of making the game. They got sucked into the high-profile actors, making a story that touched on every little thing and reference from the previous 2 outings, and they slacked on the most important part, making sure the gosh dang proton pack is easy to aim. Ultimately, Ghostbusters the video game is something that is fascinating in its platonic idea and kind of bland and disappointing in the ones and zeros that ultimately made its way out into the world. Much like basically every Ghostbusters product that's been made since the original film, it begs the question, was the original Ghostbusters lightning in a bottle? Similarly to almost every other entry that populates the series, who are doomed to walk the planet in a perpetual state of limbo, Ghostbusters the video game seemingly carries the curse that every other Ghostbusters sequel is also afflicted with. It's not the original Ghostbusters. And well, that's all we have for this episode of Nerdstalgic Gaming. What do you think? Is there another franchise that deserves a pseudo-sequel like this? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, please like, comment, and subscribe for more videos just like this.